Travis, thanks for being here again, man.
Yeah, Philip, happy to join you.
Yeah, it's good. This is the third time we're getting together to talk about DriveWorks in a very recent amount of time. So if there's folks out there watching, go back and check out the other DriveWorks videos in this playlist or on our live channel, because we started the beginning, and Travis walked me through the licensing structure of DriveWorks. This is the third. I think last time we messed around in some SolidWorks projects, and the topic came up of all the things we could be automating with DriveWorks outside of SolidWorks or around SolidWorks, right?
For sure. Yeah, there's a lot you can do that people don't typically think of when it comes to automation that doesn't necessarily involve CAD or SolidWorks.
Yeah, that kind of came up. I guess we were talking last time, and you would get into other things like accessing somebody's SQL or accessing a website. And I thought, oh, there's a lot of things outside of SolidWorks and that surround SolidWorks projects in terms of documentation or other systems we have to integrate with. And it just seemed like you can kind of automate anything with this.
Yeah, especially today, like you said, there's so many different systems that we're having to pull data from, and there's a lot of documentation and procedures and communication that has to happen, whenever you're working with customers or on a project, and there's a lot of those scenarios that DriveWorks can help out with.
Yeah, I'm always thinking of that when I talk about data management folks as well. We always think of it for CAD because all our files are related. They all reference each other. But I'm like, why wouldn't a law firm need data management, for their documents? Why wouldn't they want revision control and approval sign-offs, and a history of everything as well? So I don't understand why data management is seems trapped in the CAD world, and DriveWorks maybe needs to get out of that box too.
Yeah, we've actually got a couple of customers that use DriveWorks, and believe it or not, they don't use SolidWorks at all. So there's definitely some out of the box scenarios
Really?
that can be applied.
Do you have
Yeah,
an example of one of those? I mean, like, well, who fits in that box? Are they doing engineering?
yeah, a little bit. There's a customer in particular I know of that was using it really to just generate complex bills of material. They manufactured construction trailers,
Hmm.
and really what they would do is they would buy kind of off the shelf parts from different suppliers, and then they would assemble their trailers. They weren't actually like manufacturing, parts. Um, and so they were using DriveWorks as a configurator to just spit out this big Excel-based bill of materials, and that kind of let them know what they needed for a particular order.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I could see it going to different websites too if you buy off-the-shelf components a lot, populating that. And then, see, like most folks, after you develop a bill of materials, when you get it out to the rest of the company, you end up doing a bit of processing. Like if you get into an ERP system, maybe you got to rearrange the whole thing and rename things and add other things to it. And that's all like not handled in SolidWorks well. We just go to Excel usually.
For sure, we kind of have one bomb that we can spit out, and it's going to be formatted in a very, predefined way a lot of times. Where, like you said, each system kind of wants to have that data structured its own special way, and DriveWorks certainly lets you, have more flexibility to define the way the bomb is built, but also how it's output, whether it's XML, Excel, maybe a direct write to a database. There's a lot of ways to kind of send that info out.
Okay. So when I started looking at DriveWorks, I thought of it as a product configurator, because I use DriveWorks Express first, because it's like in all the SolidWorks versions. But you told me to kind of scratch that and just think of it as a rules-based engine, where it's like anything you're doing that is could fit if this then that, or if this happens, go get that thing. You could use DriveWorks for.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's so much that you can do with the logic that's built into DriveWorks. You know, it's obviously designed as a tool and started out as a tool to automate SolidWorks, but ultimately it's really good at just manipulating data through rules that you write. And so you can kind of apply that to a lot of things outside of SolidWorks to automate some really cool tasks and handle, integrations or document automation, depending on what your need is.
Yeah, documents is the first place I saw it because it goes into quoting on one side and then bill of materials on the other side around SolidWorks projects where it's like generating the bill of material and or modifying it afterwards. And the other place I saw it really pull things out of SolidWorks, I think last time we talked was in equations that I would have done in SolidWorks. And you kind of said, "Oh, don't even start with equations over there. You know, fully define your sketches, make it so
Yep.
things won't break, and then do all the equations over here. Do all the rules over
Yep.
here." Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, the logic is so much better on the DriveWorks side. Like you have access to a lot more functions, so you can do quite a bit more. And it's nice to have just a central interface to kind of handle the maintenance of all that logic as well. But you kind of hit the nail right on the head with, when we think of design automation, we're really just focusing on engineering automation. DriveWorks typically kind of falls into that CPQ, or really like start to finish from sales all the way down to manufacturing. We can kind of handle that complete process to make sure that data flows all the way from start to finish.
gotcha. And CPQ being like configure, price, quote type stuff.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. Well, can we take a look at that central interface? Because it's outside of SolidWorks, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I've got DriveWorks Pro Administrator open right
Right now.
now,
Oh, I
and
just got
I've
that
just
up.
got. Okay, cool. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So
Yeah.
you can kind of see the
So you can
interface that
kind of
I've
see
got
the
here.
interface that I've got here.
Just a demo project
Just
that
a
I
demo
wanted to kind of
project that I
show.
wanted to kind of
Really,
show.
where I'm going to focus
Really,
here
where
is
I'm going to
under
focus
this
here is
a
under
category
this
called Documents
category called
Files,
Documents
because
Files,
this is where you can
because this
automate
is
a
where you
bunch
can
of different
automate a
file
bunch of different
types
file types
that you might want
that you might want DriveWorks
basically
to
create for you.
basically create
Okay.
for you.
Just to kind of show you all
Just
the
to kind of
different
show
options
you all
here.
the
If I were
different
to try and
options here. If
define
I
a
were
new
to try and
document to
define a new
automate, these
document
are
to
a bunch of
automate, these
different
are
options
a
we've
bunch
got
of
to
different
spit
options
out.
we've got to
Big
spit
ones we
out.
see
Big
people
ones
using
we
the most are
see
going to be
people using the most are
Excel,
going to be Excel,
Word documents,
Word
text
documents,
files,
text
XML,
files, XML,
emails. If you're doing
emails.
some higher level
If you're doing
stuff,
some
maybe
higher
you're
level
doing like
stuff, maybe you're
REST
doing like
API and trying to
REST
communicate
API
with
and
another
trying to
system, you might
communicate
be
with
more
another
worried
system,
about
you might be more
JSON
worried
data.
about JSON
But
data.
but yeah, you've just got a
Yeah,
lot of
you've just
different
got a lot of
data
different
types depending
data
on
types
how you need to
depending
feed that
on
data
how you need
somewhere
to feed
else.
that data somewhere else.
But I figured we could probably take a look at Excel because I think it's kind of the easiest one to wrap your head around. Here's an example of a quote document, and if I just go kind of edit what we've got in here, you'll see a big, wall of rules. And at first, it may not be super clear what's going on, but I've got kind of the template file here. And what you would do if you wanted to automate this is just a quote template that somebody created in Excel. Your company probably already has one that's very similar, and you can essentially take kind of an already finished template that your company's already using. Maybe you've got engineers or sales guys that are copying this, they're filling it out manually, they're saving it with a new name. And instead of doing that process over and over again, you can just tweak this document a little bit. So all you've really got to do is go in here and kind of name these different cells. So each one of these is given its own kind of identifiable name.
Hmm.
And then once you've got those named cells, back here in DriveWorks, it'll actually read all of those named cells out, and you can start to write rules to define what data is going to go in that document when you create a new sales order or configuration, and it needs to create a new quote in this case.
Huh. Now, for some companies, you already have some sort of CRM system doing this, like Salesforce or NetSuite or something.
Yep.
Uh, would this take the place of that?
Generally, I would say no. It's always going to depend on kind of what the limitations of your current system are. So if you feel like your current system can't do what you're asking, then DriveWorks may be a good fit for that. If you like having everything in your current system, then you could, kind of pivot and maybe just feed this data into your CRM.
Mm.
Tools like Salesforce, NetSuite, they all have open API. DriveWorks can communicate with those tools pretty easily. So you've got a couple scenarios. You could feed just the data into the tool and have your CRM system create the quote, or you could just pass the quote over to your CRM system and have it stored there. Um, Usually one of those things that we sit and kind of chat about with the customer to figure out what the best fit is.
Yeah, okay. So what other documents were generated on this project? You needed quote, and then you had a whole list of stuff.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them in here. So we've got Excel-based quotes. We've got an Excel-based bill of materials. Um, Bill of materials is kind of an interesting topic because one of the limitations you'll have with SolidWorks and pretty much all the CAD tools out there is that they're generating a bill of materials based on the structure of the assembly, let's say.
Hmm.
And so if it's not in the assembly, it's not in the bill of materials. But as everybody knows, there's all sorts of things that are going to be used up during the manufacturing process or assembly process. Consumables like paint, tape, sealant, packing
For sure.
materials, all that fun stuff. And rather than trying to make, dummy files in your assemblies or manually edit that BOM later on, You can actually take your CAD BOM, you can have it automatically kind of import back into your DriveWorks project, and then you can manipulate it to add certain things that you know are going to be necessary. So you could even do something like calculate, the bounding box of something that's going to need sealant or the surface area of something that's going to need paint, and then you could, add that item in the correct quantity to an Excel-based bill of materials and spit it out.
That's pretty cool. And then I guess you could do whatever transform you need as well, because a lot of times there is a need to go from the SolidWorks bill of materials into a different ERP system. And yes, you can build nice integration, especially, I don't know if you're using PDM Pro and whatnot, but it takes a lot of custom coding. I would say the majority of folks I talk to want to get there, but what they end up doing is having one person spend a lot of time manipulating the Excel sheet and loading it into the ERP. I'm thinking maybe most of that manipulation could be done here. It is all very rules based.
Yeah, for sure. It's something you can kind of scale up. So if you think about, just using Excel files or CSV files, and your starting point is, SolidWorks just spit something out, and then we have to spend a little bit of time reworking it, and then somebody manually uploads it into ERP or some other system. From there, the first thing you can do is just have DriveWorks format that bill of materials for you. So it can
Hmm.
spit out a pre-formatted bill of materials. It'll save it to a certain location that you decided, and then somebody can go and upload it, or ERP can grab it automatically. The more advanced and kind of robust solutions are going to be that you're kind of cutting out that middle person altogether. So you're going to communicate directly with ERP, and you're going to tell ERP, here's where that file is, go upload it, or you could even do like a direct insert to the database if you need to. There's a lot of different things that you can do, but you can make some really smooth automations to kind of cut out that middleman.
Okay. And let's say if you do that on bombs and you're like, all right, when this assembly gets released, it's going to generate a bomb. Then I want the next step to be DriveWorks to take that bomb, manipulate it, maybe stick it in the ERP system. Where does that run from? Does it run inside this administrator tool? Like what could kick off that action?
Yeah, so it all depends on the environment and how it's deployed. Usually, if we're at that point, we've got a tool called Autopilot that's involved, and that's just kind of the
Ah,
central processing workstation that's going to handle a lot of this stuff, especially when it comes to generating like physical files. It'll
so
be
like,
responsible for spitting out Excel documents or processing anything that actually needs a local machine.
okay, like a PDM task host.
Pretty much, yep.
I get it. Because
You
what I
can
see is
communicate.
commonly like someone who's doing this probably has PDM Pro. They might leave one computer, maybe just one computer just sitting around, and that's their task host. And so everybody can right click and kick off tasks like generate these PDFs, make this whatever, or their workflow in PDM when they go, approved or whatever.
Yep.
Well, the task host will automatically churn them out. And you could put autopilot, I guess, on that same machine, and it's just coordinating. Hey, that just happened. That just released. Generate this. Stick it over there.
Yep, exactly. It
Okay.
there's some nuances just depending on how the integration's done, whether it's, through, an HTML request or some of that other stuff. But by and large, you can think of Autopilot as kind of being that hub that's actually going to carry out the work.
And then licensing wise, this kind of stuff, you would just need to have Microsoft Office sitting on that machine if it's just can do Excel stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. So
Okay.
just having an instance of Office there to be able to spit out those files that you need.
Yeah. Okay. So that's what I'm always keeping track of. If we're doing task stuff, it's like, oh, do I need a SolidWorks license running over there? Do I need draft site or something? And here you would just need Office for what we're talking about.
Yeah, usually you'll have Autopilot set up just like you would maybe like an engineering workstation, because for most companies that are running SolidWorks and DriveWorks, they're going to need like a license of SolidWorks standard on the Autopilot machine and a license of Office, and then you can even set it up with kind of the same hardware just so it's able to, process models and things like that efficiently.
Okay. And does it integrate with PDM pretty well?
Yeah, DriveWorks Pro integrates very well with PDM Pro. It actually ships out of the box now with a PDM Pro plugin that you can see
Oh,
here.
sweet.
So
Okay.
all I have to do is, basically enable it. And then under settings, if I drag this from my other screen, you just provide it the name of the vault. You give it credentials to access the
You
vault.
give it
So
like
we'll use,
this is my DriveWorks user. You give it like
yeah, we'll
some.
usually just go make a user called DriveWorks inside of PDM, and that just more than anything is kind of for like record keeping to know that a file was created by DriveWorks
Yeah,
or
yeah.
kind of have some history there.
I mean, it's got
Um,
to log into the system some way. So you could probably, if it was just your computer, you could use your credentials. But
for sure.
this is, we're talking about like an auto host kind of machine. So you'd have to give it something, which means it would need a contributor license of PDM.
Um, yeah, contributor license is probably the one that you would need. Um,
I don't think
Either
it
that or
wouldn't need cat editor.
no, it really wouldn't because it's typically not going to do any of those actions from the add-in. You know, it's going to check out files before it opens them and after it closes them from SolidWorks. So I
Yeah.
don't see why an
So
editor would be needed.
it wouldn't need like the high cost PDM license, just needs like a lower cost
No.
contributor license.
Yep.
Yeah,
And
that's
then
pretty sweet.
yeah, from there it's just a matter of kind of checking boxes on what you want it to do. So, you know, do you want it to process models in PDM? Absolutely. Do you want it to check in those models when it's done? Do you want it to get latest before it goes and generates? You're just kind of ticking the boxes that you need. And for most people, that kind of gets the majority of what you want when it with a PDM integration.
Yeah, okay.
Um,
Yeah, I can see where that's going. So we've talked like, configuring the files, and obviously you can kind of do whatever rules-based and SolidWorks files, put those in. I can see how it generates quotes, and on the other side of that, bill of materials.
yep.
Um, what you got any other examples of stuff it would do outside of, SolidWorks itself?
Yeah, I mean, I'll show you real quick. You know, there's some other things that I really like. When you see this category called documents data, I don't have what I would like to show here, but this is where you could set up kind of a trigger to maybe send something to a SQL table, for instance.
Hmm.
So if at some point in time, you know, we've said, hey, we've gotten to a certain point, we want to register like a new part number in a SQL database or, you know, anything else, you can set up a little export table that'll get populated with all the data you want, and then it'll get triggered and it'll go right directly to SQL um, to kind of store your data on the database.
Okay.
Similarly, tables are one of my favorite things. I know we've talked about this a little bit. Um, to kind of show a little bit more of I guess, an advanced example, SQL Server data tables are really cool here. You know, learning how to query in SQL, it's not something everybody knows. There's certainly AI tools now that can make
Yeah,
that
they're
a
very
little bit
helpful.
easier,
Yeah.
for sure. But if I wanted to show you how to access SQL here pretty easily, um, what I'll do here is I'll just decide to make a SQL Server data table. I'll hit next. It'll show me any SQL instances that are broadcasting. I've got one here, so I'll hit next. I provide credentials either through Windows or SQL Server authentication.
Sure.
And then without even having to know how to query, now I've got, you know, visibility to all the databases that are on this SQL instance. So I've
You
got
got a
some
lot of
down here like
databases, dude.
I've got too many, man.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, a lot, you know, there's some SolidWorks electrical. I've got PDM. A lot of these are DriveWorks databases.
Yeah.
But just for fun, we'll go explore my PDM demo vault. And once we've done that, you can see it's giving me a nice readable list of, you know, essentially
All the
all the
tables.
tables in there.
I mean, there's always
So
like a
we
million tables when I look in these.
there are, yeah, and luckily it lets you kind of filter this out. So it's not just going to bring in all the data and then you have to figure out how to kind of refine that with different functions. You know, I can just see all the different column sets here, all the fields, and I'm going to go grab things like document ID,
Hmm.
maybe file name, user ID, whatever we kind of want here. And then
Ah.
when I hit finish, it's going to populate a table inside of DriveWorks that I can now use for any rules that I want. So if I want to go figure out, you know, the document ID based on a file name or anything else, I can kind of see what exists in PDM without ever
Yeah.
writing a SQL query.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. I mean, I could definitely see that you use PDM wise and so many other systems that are SQL backed. Um,
Yep,
yeah, that's pretty awesome.
exactly. Yeah, and DriveWorks can do, you know, manual SQL queries, which do have some advantages, especially if you're trying to do like direct, you know, real-time reads and writes or inserts. But man, this gets you pretty far without having to learn any other languages.
Yeah, no joke. I mean, SQL to me is I've never taken any courses on it, but I end up pulling more and more data out of it and connecting to it. I feel like a wizard when I do it. But you're right, like with AI tools and whatnot, it's not that complicated really. I'm like, oh, okay, it's Excel on steroids almost.
Yeah, exactly. You just kind of have to learn the syntax to get where you want.
Okay. So you can hook in other,
So,
are there other systems like that besides SQL that I don't know about that folks use?
yeah, for sure. I mean, SQL is kind of the big one, but you'll see here we've got this ODBC data table. So that's really going to let you kind of connect to any data source that uses
Uh,
ODBC
ODBC is
connections.
like a communication thing, isn't it?
Correct. Yep. It's kind of it's outside my expertise, but you can think of it as like how you authenticate, I guess, with other systems.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
yeah, DriveWorks can hook into SQL, it can hook into Oracle, it can hook into Microsoft Access if you need it to. It's not very limited in what you can grab from outside sources. Where
Yeah.
things are heading these days seems to be more web-based. So,
That's what
everybody seems to be running like a web service-based CRM or ERP system. And
yeah,
for
that's
that,
that's what I was thinking because I mean, for instance, I've used some NetSuite in the past, and I've used some Salesforce in the past, and those I have like ways to do reports on them and pull information that are similar to SQL queries, but it's not like I have the full SQL, at my fingertips with them.
yeah, I think it's a little bit more complicated, especially because it's not standardized per se. A lot of them are using REST API, but they're all going to have their own structure, if you will. The
Yeah.
the ones that are good are fully documented, and so they've got the information out there to be able to kind of figure out what calls you need to make to that web service. Um,
But I guess if
but
you
yeah,
know it, it's possible here. Like I was messing with a project management software recently called Asana,
hmm
and they have you can get a token, that kind of accesses their API after that. If they have it documented well, like, can you take advantage of that stuff through DriveWorks?
absolutely. Yep. So you basically have to know kind of how to authenticate with that tool and then what calls are available to make. There's a lot of tools out there for kind of testing this. If anybody's listening, one I use a lot is Postman. So it's basically a free tool that you can use to kind of test, REST API communication. And that's usually what I'll do is kind of test it out there first and figure out what I need to have for authentication and all that fun stuff. And then I can just kind of replicate it in DriveWorks. But to give you an idea of how you might do that, what I've got here is the specification flow. You can just think of it as a workflow in this project. And for each one of these workflow states where you've got events like entering the state or leaving the state, you can assign little actions. And so the one that we would use for communicating with one of those web services is send HTTP request.
Ah,
So you would drag it over here, and then you can define like the request body, the headers, the URL, the verb, which is essentially like the action you're going to perform, like a get or a post. And then you've
okay.
got kind of some response criteria as well.
Say,
And
go
usually
to
you'll
this.
get that back in like JSON data.
Yeah, okay. And I still it can handle JSON. So you can say, go get me, the weather forecast this weekend or whatever. Get some up to date info from
Yeah.
the site, or
Yep.
what's the latest additions to the McMaster car catalog.
For sure. Google API is a fun one I've done before where Google Maps, I'll basically send it, a starting location and an ending location, like an address, and then it will return back to me, the drive time or the distance between those 2 points.
Oh, so you could get a rough shipping calculation done on your.
Yeah, we've done that before for products that have to get delivered somewhere by like freight, or have to be driven if it's like a vehicle. So I can figure out like what the drive time is and how far it is, and then calculate a cost based on the number of miles and an hourly rate for the driver and things like that.
All right, what if I've got a very hacky Python program put together where I'm just doing GUI automation stuff. So like I couldn't. There's a website I wanted to get info off of. I'm not good at programming, so I couldn't figure out how to do the API stuff and hook into it. But I did make a Python code that basically moves my web browser around and clicks on the things I want it to. Can I make DriveWorks run my program?
You can, yeah. It's been a while since I've done it. I think we have to do it through command prompt. So I don't, yeah, run command line with arguments, I think.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Well, you can kind of
we've
you can
got
do anything
customers
then.
that run Python kind of through this method. So they'll have little Python applications that, like maybe you've got yours that moves your web browser around. We could trigger that. I've seen some other neat ones that maybe generate like fan curve data or, some sort of calculation that they've already spent a lot of time on, and rather than trying to rebuild it in DriveWorks, they'll just have DriveWorks go run that application, and then, they'll pull that info in once it's complete.
Okay, yeah, that kind of opens the world for me. Now I'm thinking beyond SQL. Now we're thinking in the website stuff. Once you started me run command line, I'm like, oh, okay. I don't really see any limits anymore.
For sure. Yeah, you can really get kind of crazy. You can also do some really neat things that maybe we'll shelve for another day with what's called the integration theme on DriveWorks Live, where it basically exposes DriveWorks Live as its own, I don't know, like REST API. So that's really good if you want to kind of have something on your website trigger something in DriveWorks. So you want to have like reaction or a real-time communication between your website and a DriveWorks project. So
Ooh,
something can happen on your website that would cause DriveWorks to then go and do something else
yeah,
because it's opening up the API kind of in both directions.
I love it. Yeah, maybe on another time we could look at some specifics like this. This kind of gave me a real overview, it's kind of eye-opening of what we could do outside of SolidWorks, and we could look at something specific. Maybe I'll see on some feedback from videos or customer requests. We can do something helpful. But I'm glad you mentioned live because that is also one of the first places I feel like people, when they're looking for more info, they encounter it's live.driveworks.com, I think.
DriveWorksLive.com.
DriveWorksLive.com. DriveWorksLive.com. Okay. Yeah, because that's a spot where, you can start to click through as well projects that are there. And basically, it's doing what we're talking about. It's already in the website.
Yep,
Um, it's kind of the high end, I think, of DriveWorks. But yeah, you can go here like you're showing and try examples and click through and go, okay, someone's made this project. When I get to the end of it, it produces documents like a sample quote and whatnot. And then, yeah, that could be hooked all the way back to, like you were saying, autopilot. So somebody could say,
yeah,
yeah, go ahead and generate all the parts documentation. They're paid for their quote, whatever.
for sure. Yeah, these are all different sample projects that kind of just show examples of how flexible the tool is. But if you were to run any of these, I imagine back at the DriveWorks HQ in England, they've got several autopilot machines that are just processing all of these requests to send you an email
Mm,
with attachments and examples of what that project does. The one I would kind of encourage everybody to check out from this webinar would be all the way at the bottom. They have these technology stacks, and there's one for documents specifically. So if you hit explore here, this project will pretty much show you some interactive examples of how DriveWorks can automate things like Word documents or Excel files. You can kind of play around with it and see in real time just some neat examples of, automating things outside of CAD.
yeah, yeah, very cool. That's a great resource. And maybe I want to mention another one. Can you pull up our DriveWorks page on our website? There's really
Yeah.
two things on our website that I think folks should check out, at this level of it. One is, our DriveWorks page over here has kind of the stair step to things. So, if you're under CAD and you look at design automation, or if you Google DriveWorks to it, you'll get to this spot that I think is laid out really well, like we've done in the past kind of videos here, from Express to Pro. And we've got like ability to just speak to an expert right on here as well.
For
So for
sure.
more to it, I mean, this will drive you to the right places, and we try to keep this with the most relevant resources. But the other thing that's on our website, maybe if you go back or to the top, is our events. And I wanted to mention this because it happens every year, but it's been moved up this year. Is the 3D Experience World Conference. Used to be lovingly known as the SolidWorks World Conference, and now it's 3D Experience World Conference.
Go.
Um, it used to be like at the end of February. Now it's the very first week of February. February 2nd, that Monday, we have our customer appreciation event there. So this is in Houston. If anybody's checking this video out and it is still before February 2nd, that's coming up pretty soon. Uh, Come down to this. DriveWorks is going to be at World. They're there every year. They have really cool stuff in the partner pavilion to check out, and other great like real world customer examples, use cases. They'll host kind of spin-off sessions with their developers. Forget what they call them, but sessions, where they'll do talks and answer questions and whatnot. So if you make it down to Houston, the first week of February 26th, our event is worth it. Seeing DriveWorks is there is worth it. And reach out to us if you're having issues with travels or tickets or something. We can help out with all that.
For sure. It's always a good time. Nice to get everybody together and kind of chat about SolidWorks and what's going on.
Yeah, I know you're not coming down this year, which is a shame. I'm in Austin, so them doing it 2 years in a row in Houston is great for me. I'm like, great, we're in Texas. You're up in Dallas, so it's like, you're
Yep.
still in Texas, but you might as well be a state away. I know we got
Yeah,
a few
I
folks
won't be
coming
out there
down.
this year, but we'll have plenty of the MLC crew out there to meet everybody.
Yeah, well, you got a little one at the house too. It's probably good to
Yeah.
not
Yeah,
travel the whole week.
yeah, I can help out around the house for sure.
Cool. Well, man, anything else you wanted to sprinkle in here when it comes to DriveWorks and being outside of SolidWorks?
I mean, the only thing we really didn't touch on was, maybe calculations. I don't know what kind of time limit we've got, but if there's anything we wanted to look at as far as just kind of running, calculations that are related to CAD inside of DriveWorks, we could take a look.
Tell you what, I've seen some inside of CAD, some really slick ones that you've done, but then we're back inside SolidWorks. Um, maybe we save it for another one. We'll do a like a project specific meeting and do some
Sure.
equations. Yeah.
Sounds good.
All right, man. Well, thanks again for the time, dude. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Philip. Catch you later.